Welcome to Kinky List by Skoob Podcast that explores the fascinating intersection of technology, art, and human sexuality. I'm your host, Zara Black, and today we're diving deep into a world that exists in the shadows of mainstream entertainment, animated pornography. From its historical roots in the 18th century erotic prints to today's sophisticated 3D machinima, we'll explore how this unique medium has evolved to become a significant part of digital culture. Now, before we begin, I want to acknowledge that today's topic deals with mature content. This episode is intended for adult audiences and contains frank discussions about sexuality, art, and culture. If you're not comfortable with these topics, this might not be the episode for you. So grab your headphones, settle in, and let's embark on this fascinating journey through the animated landscape of human desire. To understand animated pornography, we need to travel back in time, way back. The genesis of this medium didn't start with computers or even traditional animation. It has deep roots that extend centuries into the past, embedded in the traditions of erotic literary fiction and visual arts. Long before photography existed, artists were creating erotic engravings, graphic prints, drawings, and paintings. These weren't just meant to arouse, they were designed to entertain through exaggeration, mockery, and excess. Some of these visual representations, particularly paintings, were crafted for the private amusement of affluent male patrons. But prints, they had a much wider reach, especially after budget-friendly printing presses emerged in the late 18th century. Here's where it gets fascinating. In these historical visual representations, human anatomy took on fantastical properties. Genitalia would detach from bodies, float independently, morph shapes, and engage in impossible acts of copulation. This wasn't realism. This was fantasy made manifest through art. This tradition of impossible anatomy and surreal sexuality branched directly into sexually explicit comics in the early 20th century. One of the most notable examples were the 1930s Tijuana Bibles, underground comic books that featured pornographic twists on popular comic strips and mainstream cultural figures. Imagine your favorite cartoon characters reimagined in explicitly sexual scenarios, and you'll get the idea. Then came the game changer, animated films. Suddenly, the visual tradition of graphic pornography met the dynamic possibilities of motion pictures. Early animated pornographic films adopted many elements from their comic predecessors: ribald humor, exaggerated anatomy, and creatively impossible sexual positions. But here's the kicker. The very first example of animated pornography was created way earlier than you might think. Eveready Harton in Buried Treasure, produced between 1928 and 1929, is a 6-minute masterpiece of early animation that would make your jaw drop. The titular character's oversized penis literally becomes a character in its own right, detaching from him, masquerading as a third leg, confronting oversized creatures, and even getting trapped in compromising situations. The film is packed with puns, bodily transformations, and constant blurring between animate and inanimate, human and animal domains. It's surreal, it's explicit, and it laid the groundwork for everything that followed. Fast forward to the early 1970s, and we encounter something truly remarkable. German Super 8 film loops that took beloved fairy tales and turned them into surreal pornographic wonderlands. Schwänzel und Gretel, known in English as Dixel and Gretel, is perhaps the most infamous example. Picture this: trees and rooftops sprouting human-like genitalia, cross-species orgies featuring humans, squirrels, owls, and pigs, all characterized by hyperbolic and relentless sexuality. This wasn't just porn. It was a complete reimagining of familiar narratives through an explicitly sexual lens. This German collection included comic escapades like Buffalo Bill in Western settings, reimagined Max and Moritz characters, a well-endowed Bugs Bunny-like character, and even Snow White engaging in group activities with dwarfs, complete with vegetables being launched from intimate places. These cartoons weren't just designed to titillate through explicit content. They primarily aimed to entertain through their excessive and fantastical depictions. The humor was as important as the sexuality, creating a unique blend that would influence animated erotica for decades to come. What's fascinating is how these early works established many of the conventions we still see today. The transformation of familiar characters, the blend of humor and sexuality, and the use of impossible scenarios that could only exist in animation. Now let's jump to the modern era. Contemporary animated pornography is entirely generated by computers, which means no real human bodies are involved in its creation. This might seem like a minor technical detail, but it's actually revolutionary. This genre is essentially a product of algorithms, serving as a medium where creators can explore scenarios that are highly improbable or entirely impossible to enact in real life without raising moral, ethical, or physical concerns. We're talking about realms of imagination and fantasy unhampered by the constraints of real-world physics or societal expectations. The nature of animation allows for endless transformations of fictional, virtual bodies that exist in a realm divorced from reality, unencumbered by laws of gravity or causality. These animated figures can undertake actions and transform in ways that flesh and blood humans cannot. We're talking about exaggerated body proportions and extreme physical feats without injuries or anatomical limitations. Certain studios have pioneered techniques like visualizing internal movements, showing what's happening beneath the skin during intimate acts, something easily accomplished through animation, but impossible with traditional filming methods. In this fantastical setting, animated porn marries the inventive potential of animation with the inherent hyperbole of pornography, creating stories rich in exaggerated gestures, augmented body features, and scenarios that defy physics. The animated figures possess anatomy that can expand, alter, and engage in limitless acts with both objects and mythical creatures. The boundaries of what's sexually possible become fluid, much like colors merging in a watercolor painting. In genres like hentai, human forms are often exaggerated to such an extent that they lose resemblance to actual human beings. Here's where things get really interesting from a technological standpoint. The world of 3D animated pornography extensively utilizes something called machinima, films created using game engines and enhanced with additional software like Source Filmmaker. Machinima filmmaking inherently involves imitation and interpretation. Audiences anticipate the creative reinterpretation of familiar game environments, characters, and scenarios. It's essentially digital puppetry, manipulating characters into new postures, environments, and actions. In sexually explicit machinima, we often see female characters, from iconic figures like Lara Croft to heroines from games like Final Fantasy, engaging in complex interactions with non-human or hybrid beings. The primary draw often lies in these familiar female characters, with the specific details of their partners being secondary. This content exists within a broader ecosystem of DIY fan videos, mashups, remixes, and parodies. It's the result of fan participation in popular culture combined with accessible digital production technologies. The world of machinima is characterized by user feedback, collaboration, widespread online distribution, and opportunities for creators of all skill levels. The aesthetic is typically raw and somewhat imperfect, which actually contributes to its appeal. While some content appears on mainstream platforms, more explicit material circulates on specialized sites. The technical quality varies dramatically, from low-fidelity animations with clunky movements to sophisticated productions with high production values. These productions operate under fair use copyright policies due to their nature as parodies made for nonprofit purposes. The collaborative aspect is crucial. Teams of animators, voice actors, and artists unite around a shared interest in creating this content as a hobby, not a commercial venture. Now, you might think that animated pornography is all about the explicit content, but you'd be missing a crucial element: storytelling. The narrative structures in this medium are surprisingly sophisticated and varied. Let's start with comedy. Take The Frantic, Frustrated, and Female from 1994, which navigates humor without relying on parody. The story centers on a woman unable to achieve satisfaction despite varied encounters, leading to increasingly absurd situations involving multiple characters trying to solve this predicament. The humor comes from the storyline, whimsical subtitles, and exaggerated character designs. Then there's horror, a fascinating subversion of Western methodology. While Western horror often employs scary elements to manifest sexual anxiety, animated erotica flips this script. Series like Angel of Darkness, La Blue Girl, and Urotsukidoji, Legend of the Overfiend, render horror as a nuanced subtext in explicitly sexual tales. Angel of Darkness employs classic Gothic conventions, solitary buildings, hidden basements, storms, and entities from other dimensions. But characters aren't doomed to violent deaths for engaging in sexual acts, unlike Hollywood's slasher films. La Blue Girl portrays sisters from a clan of ninjas with supernatural heritage, navigating battles against various threats while dealing with their unusual lineage and sexual identity challenges. Despite their supernatural nature, viewers are encouraged to root for them. At the extreme end, Urotsukidoji represents the pinnacle of sex horror crossover, generating 13 adaptations between 1989 and 1995. What's fascinating is its underlying conservatism. It showcases varied sexual encounters, but reserves punishment for those whose actions diverge excessively from societal norms. The perception and interpretation of this content varies dramatically across cultures, creating fascinating tensions and misunderstandings. Consider the difference between Eastern and Western sensibilities. Panty jokes and accidental groping scenes, common in manga, might seem inappropriate to Western audiences unfamiliar with Japanese culture. But these elements serve specific cultural functions. Take Dragon Ball, immensely popular among tweens. American parents bought this series for children based on the edited anime version, only to discover the original manga contained nudity, sexual humor, and scatological jokes. The cultural editing process reveals how differently societies approach sexuality in media. These jokes are typically humorous because they embarrass the protagonist. The entertainment comes from the hero's shocked expression, stuttering and blushing as he realizes his unintentional actions. This acknowledges teenage hormonal awkwardness while not portraying inappropriate behavior as socially acceptable. Japanese culture openly acknowledges certain fetishes and is more likely to laugh at such quirks than condemn them. American audiences, however, are generally more sensitive about perceived inappropriate content, especially given heightened public concern about exploitation. This cultural divide affects how animated erotic content is received, distributed, and discussed across different societies. What's considered humorous in one culture might be offensive in another. creating complex dynamics for creators and distributors in our globalized digital world. Let's dive deeper into the technical aspects that make modern animated erotica possible. The evolution from hand-drawn animation to computer-generated content has opened up possibilities that were previously unimaginable. Modern 3D animation software allows creators to construct detailed virtual worlds with physics engines that can be selectively ignored or modified. Characters can be designed with anatomical impossibilities, environments can shift and change at will, and scenarios can unfold that would be physically dangerous or impossible to film with real actors. The democratization of animation tools has been crucial. Software that once required expensive workstations and specialized training is now accessible to hobbyists with consumer-grade computers. This accessibility has led to an explosion of content created by individuals and small teams rather than major studios. Motion capture technology, originally developed for mainstream entertainment, has been adapted for this medium, allowing for more realistic movement while maintaining the fantastical elements that animation provides. The combination of realistic motion with impossible anatomy creates a unique aesthetic that bridges reality and fantasy. Rendering techniques have advanced to the point where virtual characters can appear photorealistic while maintaining the exaggerated proportions and capabilities that define the medium. This technical sophistication allows creators to focus more on storytelling and character development rather than fighting with technical limitations. One of the most fascinating aspects of modern animated erotica is how it's created and shared. This isn't typically a commercial enterprise driven by major studios. It's a grassroots community of creators working collaboratively. Online platforms facilitate not just distribution, but active collaboration. Voice actors, animators, writers, and artists connect across geographical boundaries to work on projects driven by shared interests rather than financial incentives. This community aspect creates content that's often more experimental and diverse than commercially driven material. Feedback loops between creators and audiences are immediate and direct. Creators can gauge response to their work instantly and adjust future projects accordingly. This creates a dynamic where content evolves rapidly based on community preferences and technical innovations. The legal framework around fair use and parody protection allows creators to work with familiar characters and settings without fear of legal repercussions, as long as the work remains non-commercial. This protection has been crucial in fostering creativity and experimentation within the community. Version control and collaborative tools originally designed for software development have been adapted for animation projects, allowing multiple creators to work on different aspects of the same project simultaneously, regardless of their physical location. Why are people drawn to animated erotica when more realistic alternatives exist? The answer lies in the unique psychological space that animation occupies. Animation removes the viewer one step from reality, creating a psychological buffer that allows exploration of fantasies that might be uncomfortable if depicted with real actors. The knowledge that no real people are involved in the creation removes ethical concerns about exploitation or harm. The impossibility factor is crucial. Animated content can explore scenarios that are physically impossible, emotionally complex, or socially taboo without real-world consequences. This creates a safe space for fantasy exploration that doesn't exist in other media. The exaggeration inherent in animation, from facial expressions to physical reactions, amplifies emotional content in ways that realistic depiction cannot. This amplification can create more intense emotional responses while maintaining the safety buffer of obvious artificiality. Character design in animation allows for idealization beyond human possibility while still maintaining recognizable human characteristics. This creates figures that can embody specific desires or fantasies without the complications that come with real human complexity and individuality. As we look at where this medium is headed, several trends emerge that suggest continued evolution and sophistication. Artificial intelligence is beginning to play a role in content creation, from automated lip syncing to procedural animation generation. This could democratize creation even further, while raising new questions about authorship and creativity. Virtual reality technology is creating possibilities for immersive experiences that go beyond traditional viewing. This represents a fundamental shift from passive consumption to active participation, though it also raises new technical and ethical challenges. Real-time rendering engines originally developed for gaming are being adapted for animation, allowing for interactive content that responds to viewer choices. This blurs the line between animation and gaming, creating hybrid experiences that couldn't exist in other media. The increasing sophistication of physics simulation allows for more realistic interaction between impossible elements, creating content that feels physically plausible even when depicting impossible scenarios. Machine learning algorithms are being developed that can analyze successful content and generate new scenarios based on identified patterns, though this also raises questions about originality and artistic expression. As we wrap up our journey through the world of animated erotica, one thing is clear. This isn't just about fantasy. It's a mirror reflecting how technology, art, and human desire constantly evolve together. From secret sketches of the past to today's hyperreal 3D worlds, creators have always used this medium to push limits and question what's possible. But what if the most fascinating part of this story isn't the art itself, but what it reveals about us, about how we blur the line between imagination and reality in our search for connection and meaning? There's so much more beneath the surface: stories, scandals, and cultural clashes you haven't heard yet. Download the Skoob app now to unlock the full story and dive deeper into the hidden world of digital desire. I'm your host, Zara Black, and this has been the Kinky List. Until next time, stay curious.